Right, let's talk about a separate election thing, which is to do with social media in this election, because it's clear that social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter are already key battlegrounds in the election, more so than ever. All the political parties are fighting to capture your attention online, and they don't need long, just a few seconds will do if it gets the message across. But have you already been taken in by information on social media? In other words, misled? Often what you see or hear isn't entirely false, but just subtly altered. Take the Conservatives. Earlier this week, they were accused of doctoring footage from ITV's Good Morning Britain to falsely suggest that a senior Labour politician had been unable to answer a question about Brexit. So let me just play you this. The clip was posted on social media. It shows Sir Keir Starmer appearing to falter when he's asked about his party's policy.
Why would the EU give you a good deal if they know that you're going to actively campaign against it?
So during that music, that background music, you basically see Keir Starmer sort of goldfishing there, not saying anything. Actually, listen to the original. It's different.
Why would the EU give you a good deal if they know that you're going to actively campaign against it?
Well,
Which is
Piers,
clearly what most of you are going to be doing.
Well, Piers, I have been talking to the EU, to political leaders across the EU 27 countries for 3 years.
So no pause there at all. When the BBC took the Conservatives to task for the video, they simply reposted the interview without the offending edit. Our media editor Amal Rajan says we can expect to see more of this during the election.
This is how modern media strategy works. First, doctor a video. Then, when you're called out for it, publish fresh attacks. What matters on social media is the noise you create, the cut-through, rather than accuracy. Of course, that creates a problem for journalists. By highlighting fake news, you draw fresh attention to a falsehood, so ensuring that the falsehood is seen by countless more. The Conservative Party may have grounds, therefore, for chalking up the doctored video as a win.
And it's not just the Conservatives who are at it. The Lib Dems have also been criticised for a series of bar charts that they're using online that makes it look like the chance of winning in certain seats is better than it really is. And Labour stands accused of pushing the idea on social media that the NHS is basically up for sale under the Tories. So if your timeline is going to be flooded with misleading clips and articles and memes, should we just take social media out of the election? Do you know who to trust? Are you really worried about this? 08000 288 291, email vine@bbc.co.uk. We're joined by Ash Sarkar, editor of Novara Media, and Tom Harwood, reporter for Guido Fawkes. The website does a lot of politics. Tom Harwood, you go first. This should worry us, shouldn't it?
I'm not sure it's all that different from how elections have been run for decades. The only difference now is it's going to people directly from parties rather than through the filter of a media organisation or a dead tree press newspaper. In many ways, having this sort of content come directly from parties means that people can see who's producing it and they can be more sceptical, whereas from decades before we've had lots of similar half-truths or manipulated statements come through the sort of more traditional media, and they haven't perhaps had as much scepticism as we're rightly applying today.
OK, so there's a reason to think this is maybe a bit freer and better, Ash.
Well, I am in favour of social media being a tool for people to politically communicate with one another. For me, the issue is when trusted sources, or sources who you should trust, edit clips to be completely misleading from what originally happened. You're always going to have parties pushing out clips or articles or takes which suit their narrative, right? That's a part of propaganda. For me, the difference in ethics is between something which is an interpretation and something which is an outright lie. We can class the editing of the Keir Starmer clip as an outright lie rather than an interpretation.
Would you agree with that, Tom?
I'm not sure we can. I don't think there's really any difference between that and, for example, a poster that was used previously of, Labour's policy on arms with a picture of Jeremy Corbyn throwing his hands up in the air. I mean, it's a similar sort of interpretation of what the truth is, because ultimately the Tories were very happy to post that full interview with Keir Starmer, which showed that he didn't satisfy.
Do you see it, Tom, as satire and fun in a way, do you?
Well, it's sort of poking fun, but it's also making the point that Labour's policy on Brexit is confusing and ridiculous and can be poked fun at.
Let me just play you both another example here. So this is from the USA. That's quite a famous example. This is about Nancy Pelosi. She did an interview. She's the Democratic Speaker of the US House of Representatives. Donald Trump doesn't like her. She did an interview. This is a little excerpt from the interview.
We thought we had some level of agreement, but you never know with this president of the United States. So that's what happened this morning. It was very, very, very strange.
Okay, so she's come out of Donald Trump's meeting and it's all been a bit bad. There's then an edited version, and this is it.
And we thought we had some level of agreement, but you never know with this president of the United States. So that's what happened this morning. It was very, very, very strange.
You hear the difference there, Ash? Because she sounds drunk in the second one.
Well, I mean, that sort of editing in a way which is intended to speak to your base and rile them up is something which I think sits apart from an ethical use of media footage and clips.
Tom, does it go too far, that one?
I'm not sure the context of that one, so I'm hesitant to sort of outright say anything about it.
It's a bit like the Keir Starmer in that it was slowed down without anyone knowing.
If it was presented as if it was how it happened, then I think that's probably going a step too far. But I mean, ultimately, is this all that different from the sort of lines that we've heard for decades in this country? You know, the Labour perennial attack that we have just 3 or 4 hours to save the NHS before it somehow magically gets privatised. All these sort of same half-truths have been peddled for decades, and I'm not sure it's that different this time around.
That's a good point. 5 hours to save the NHS, Ash. That's probably untrue as well.
I mean, that's also not something which I think the Labour Party have said. But look, the spokesperson for Brexit Pravda is making a point which suits his purposes.
Is this Tom here?
And his purposes are that it is fine to take a sort of clip which people would rely on, right? Because we're used to looking at media clips from the news posted all over social media as a way of us getting our primary
had a
information.
Red filter on this is
wait,
ridiculous.
hang
it
on.
wasn't
Tom,
presenting
God bless
as
you,
news.
but I haven't stopped talking.
Okay.
All right. So look, we are used to ingesting our media in that way, and we're used to perhaps not even putting the sound on and just reading the subtitles. So when the clip's presented in a way which presents Keir Starmer as being stumped, yes, that is an outright lie. And if it was the case that it was obviously satirical, it was just meant to be a joke,
with the red flash,
no one would take it seriously.
Music behind it, though?
Then how come the initial comment from the Conservative Party is, well, we had to shorten the clip? They changed their tune as the story got bigger, which is why I'm inclined not to believe you, Tom.
Tom, you say if you've got music and a red flash and you've got all that stuff...
I just don't think that Ash's criticism stacks up to any scrutiny, because this was a clearly heavily edited video. It had filters, it had flashes, it had music, it had subtitles. It wasn't as if people were watching TV. Anyone watching that clip, unless they were being deliberately disingenuous, could clearly see it was edited for comedic purposes.
In the analogue era, before we had all of this, weren't the lies bigger? Labour's tax bombshell or whatever else. I'm just trying to think of other examples of stuff where you just, classic being, I suppose, the Lib Dems saying we're going to abolish tuition fees and then they don't. That was just as bad, Ash Sarkar, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And
so this hasn't made it worse.
And none of what I'm saying stacks up to a defence of political parties' relationship with establishment media. I think in particular the culture of lobby journalism has been way too pally, particularly with this business of reprinting, anonymous government sources and so on and so forth. I think that particularly for political reporters who sit aside from the work of commentators and analysts, that they should be much more critical of the information that they receive and subsequently put out. And so I don't think that we've entered a new age of special dishonesty. I think where we are is that we don't know how to react to the sort of information bomb, which is the existence of the internet.
Thank you very much indeed, Ash Sarkar, editor of Novara Media, and Tom Harwood, who's a reporter for Guido Fawkes' website, talking about the influence of social media on the election and whether you are concerned there's just too many untruths flying around.